In this tutorial, I'm going to go over box sizing with the box model. And the box model goes margin, border, padding, then content. And you'll know more about what that is in a few minutes. Now, we actually adjusted a few things in earlier tutorials, like with these LIs. We used a padding right to create some spacing. So just so you can see it again, you can see that the spacing in between starts at 0, and I can do that. Now, one of the confusions a lot is what's the difference between padding and maybe a margin? Because if I do that too, look, it looks exactly the same, except this maybe turned a different color. But more or less, it's looking exactly the same. So really, what's the difference? And so that's what I want to explain. Now, what's kind of cool about an inspect element also is if you go all the way down, you can actually see the box model within here. You have your content within the center, which is obviously this information. You have your padding, which padding sits between the border and the margin, or the border and the content. Then you have the border right in the middle of the two. And then you have your margin. You can actually see these highlighting. Since there's no padding in this case, you don't highlight anything. So to explain this in deeper thought, I actually created a little box model demo. And I did this by just doing some simple HTML with an inline style, which isn't necessarily good practice, but for this demo, it really shows the point. And I added a padding of 20, a margin of 20, and I put a blue border with a red background. And I set the width and height to 200. And I will show you exactly what this comes in play. Now let's open up Inspect Element so we can see this. We'll go back over to our demo so you can see a little bit of how this works. You can see my margin. It's adjusting really everything on here, but if like this was like if there's other stuff in here, since we're at 20 pixels, we're only going to do the outside. So you can see that it doesn't affect the border color or the inside color, the background color. And it's really putting space in between other elements on the board. The border is pretty easy to understand. It's just simply a border. And padding is right in between. Now notice that the content right here doesn't start until the padding ends. And so it's really nice for if you want to create like elements and you want to put text and put some spacing on the ends, which like in Word it would actually be called margins, but in this it'd be paddings, since the margin's on the very end. Now the next thing that I want to explain is the difference between different box sizing. Now this is like a kind of a newer technique, and it can cause some confusion. Now there's a property called box sizing, and box sizing, the actual this is the default, so you can see there's no changes because this is the default setting that HTML provides. Now what I recommend using is the border box, which is the alternative. Now really what the difference is you can see right here, this is now the same width, meaning everything's included in this right here, the width. So the measurement from the end of the border to the beginning of the border is taking the height and width into consideration. Whereas if I do the content box, now the height and width only really come into play with the height and width really only come into play without the border, and the padding and margins are not included. So what this really does is it makes things a lot easier to size up. Imagine you have a huge container that's 1,000, and you have maybe 5 containers within it. The easiest thing to do is set the width to be 200 each, so you can accurately get this. But if you have various margins and various paddings, the math is going to get a little bit harder. So this is just something to help you out. Of course, you can do it with both. Theoretically, you could make everything appear the same way, but it is nice to use the content box versus, or not the content box, the border box instead of content box. Really will make your life easier. This brings me back to Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap actually provides an element to like everything, where it actually makes the border box the standard. You can see that right in here. And if you go into the source code of Bootstrap, they use a star, which, remember from previous tutorials, means select everything. So it selects every element inside of here and changes the default border box to, or the default content box to border box. You can see that if I actually undo these, and also undo these too, and these, you can see that it actually changes the whole look of the website. I'm going to refresh this so we don't have that. But it is something to think about, that if you're making a website that doesn't involve Bootstrap, you're going to have a different type of way to do sizing. And 100 pixels might not look like 100 pixels on various sites. It's something that definitely confused me a lot in the beginning of my career, and hopefully this wouldn't confuse you guys. Also, the other thing to consider when doing box sizing and deciding like when to use it, or when you're typing it, is like what Bootstrap did right here. They add some prefixes, the one with WebKit, and also the one with Moz, or short for Mozilla, which is for Firefox. These are pretty important to add. Usually, if you don't have it, it'll still work, but it is good practice to use these prefixes for various properties that call for it. Now, going into various things with like padding and borders and everything, each one have, like, you can do a hyphen, and then you can control which margin you're talking about. So I change that to margin top. You can see that it customizes the margin so it's only in the top. Or maybe I can do left, and let's say I do 200, so on. The other way of doing this is they also have shorthand. And let's say I want to do the top for padding. I can do something like this, or this is right. Top would be right in here, and this would be right. So you can really control how this all looks based off this. The other ways of doing shorthand would be, let's say, 20 pixels and then 0, which you can see right in here. You have 20 up on the top, 20 on the bottom, 0 and 0. So this means it's top and bottom, and then left and right. The last one would be if you have 3 of them. So let's add like 100 pixels. And what this does is top, left and right, and then bottom. You can see this. So top, left and right, and bottom. And these work for both margin and padding. Now the same sort of idea works with borders, but borders don't really have a shorthand that I really know of. So, but you could adjust the borders for various ones. So for the bottom, let's say you want the border on 2 sides, you can do border bottom and top, solid, and below. You can also do certain things with borders where you control the color. So that would just be border color equals red. Or let's do like purple. You can adjust the border width. And I'm going to make this 40 pixels. And so on. And there's a bunch of other things. There's border images. There's border radius. Border radius is actually really cool if you want to put a rounded corner. 20 pixels like that. You can also make this, since it's a 200 by 200, if I add another 0, it'll make it into a circle, which is kind of cool. This effect actually kind of looks like an eye, which is pretty interesting. But you can really adjust it how you want, play around with it, look up some various things you can do with borders. There's really a bunch of them. There's probably 20 or 30 different properties you can do for just borders. Well, that concludes this video. I hope it helped. Talk to you guys soon.